So thanks very much, Dan, for coming up. Again, so Dan's someone I followed on Twitter for a long time. I've seen some of the stuff that you output, through NoCode, and I think it's just awesome. So really, excited to hear about, well, for everyone else to hear about what you've built and, hear about your journey. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Dominic, for doing a great talk. I don't know if you know, but I've met this is the first time I've met Dominic, but I've met him. I've known him for like 2 years. Yeah. But it's the first time that we've actually, due to the pandemic, and no code. Cool. I'm going to talk about building apps for social impact with no code. Dominic did a wonderful talk about all of the space, so that should give you some context, and then I'll just say some stuff in time with the deck that I'm going to present. Ooh, what's going on there? Hello, I'm Dan. I am the growth and innovation lead at a company called Tectonic, a company that I started with my brother, which is a customer research company. I'm the chief non-technical officer of a company called Evermind, which I'll talk about later. Founder and developer of a platform called Welos, which is wholesome OnlyFans, which is something I was working on. Founder and developer of a platform called Voyage, which is a platform to help people understand their mental health. And I'm also building something new, which I will talk about in a bit as well. But I still don't know how to code. I studied computer science at university. Yeah, which is why the sorry mom's there. Yeah, I wanted to make video games. And so I was like, okay, I should go and study computer science, and then I can make video games and live my best life. On the first day, I was like, I cannot do this. And then I told my mum that I want to leave, and she was like, you've only got 3 years to go. Just deal with it. That obviously didn't work out. So then I did tech support for a while, because if you can't code, then you help people. And then I became a copywriter at an agency. And then I started a music tech startup. And I did the whole thing that you're supposed to do with a startup. So my brother is the founder of that. And we raised money, we had users, we had paying customers, we did all the things. And we spent a lot on development. So many things wrong. We didn't know who our customer was. We didn't know why they were doing what they were doing. So it was a platform to help DJs monetize, but DJs don't spend any money on things that aren't music. So nothing that we did was right, but we spent so much money developing the platform. And then Cambridge Analytica happened, and all of our platform was connected to all the different APIs. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And then when Cambridge Analytica happened, all the services closed down, so our whole business closed down. So I was actually talking about platform risk. When you build on a platform, you are beholden to certain things that happen, and I'll talk about that a bit later as well. But failed with the music tech startup, but we co-founded a customer research company, which we were building at the same time, and helping people not make the same mistakes that we did. So actually talking to your customers first to determine what you should build makes you build a better product. And thanks to NoCode, I now build apps for businesses, charities, and entrepreneurs. I build products I want to see exist in the world, and I build apps that help people, which is a far cry from the 18-year-old me who was like, I can't spell hello world. Yeah, so NoCode allows individuals and people to be able to make things for themselves and for others, as Dominic so eloquently put. Dominic did this, but I really like this slide. So no-code is a term used for building software and services without having to write code. Very similar to what Dominic wrote, actually, so yay. Why should you build with no-code? So to learn, just like you want to learn the tools, it's fine to learn stuff. To play around and figure things out, to test ideas. You might have an idea that you want to build, and you're just okay, let me just see if one element of that is something. It might not be the whole thing, but let me just see. To experiment, to scratch a personal itch. So a friend of mine built an app with Glide to help him and his wife manage shopping. So it's a two-person app, but it helps their marriage. So that's the power of being able to use software, right? It's like writing, yeah. Some people are better at writing than others, but being able to write is pretty handy. To solve problems quickly, not as quickly as I'm going through this deck, but pretty quickly. to make money, useful in a capitalist world, and much, 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 much more. That's the reasons. Those are the reasons why you should build with no code. So I typically try to build things in like the social impact space, or if I'm intrigued by technology, I'll be like, cool, let me just see what I can build. No code aligns itself well with social impact causes for a number of reasons. So it's cost effective, a lot of the stuff that Dominic was talking about. So it's cost effective. Charities and social impact groups typically don't have that much money or don't allocate that much money. So it's easier to prove something if you want to build something in the social impact space and then potentially get more money. It's easier to build stuff to test because the chances are, and I say this to all the people that I work with, the chances are you're wrong about your thing. Like regardless of what you're doing, whether you're building a social impact thing, you're just wrong. There's an element of it that's right, but most of it is probably wrong. And it's probably better to build the least that you can build to figure out what's wrong. It's permissionless. I don't have to ask anyone. I can just do stuff. So even within your organization, like Dominic was talking about before, like there are people within the organizations that are hacking together things, like without having to speak to IT. Like if you want to build an iOS or Android app, you have to go through Apple or Android and submit it, and then Apple will say no. So for example, when you want to submit an app to the App Store, if you don't have like an About Us page, no, it's like a contact page and a terms and services and stuff, then they'll just be like, no. But if you don't know that, but the chances are, if your idea is not really an idea, you might not have any terms of services. So being able to build things permissionlessly allows you to figure out what your thing is. It's fast to develop, depending on how fast you know code, but it's much faster. Like, so for example, I was learning, so no code is a gateway drug to code. So I was learning like Web3 stuff, and I had to do some code on my machine. And it took me a whole day to set up the environment for me to be able to even just start coding. In a whole day, I could probably build 3 apps. Dominic could probably build 12. So that's one of the things. It's easy to iterate, don't have to ask anyone. In my music tech startup, one of the things that we noticed, there's a platform called Hotjar, which allows you to see how people interact with your website. We would do a very good job of convincing people to come to our website because we're very charming. Then they would go to the website, and then you could see on their mouse, they would hover around on the homepage to try and figure out what the hell we were talking about. And we were like, oh, okay. So after a while, we're like, okay, cool, we need to change the copy. Spoke to the developer, hey, could you change the copy on the website? I've already written it, just like bish, bash, bosh. He's like, yeah, I'll do it in 3 weeks. It's like, cool, like, no. With no code, depending on what tools you're using, but most of them you can just change stuff by yourself. Like, you don't need to ask anyone. That's not to say that we don't love developers. Developers have a time and a place in this world. They're wonderful, but it's easier to, when you don't know what your thing is, and you need to iterate fast and put it in front of customers in order for you to learn what the problem is, like as they understand it, whether you can build the thing, whether the market's there or not. Like the fact that Dominic was saying that even without any marketing, his growth was going up on some things, that's a good indication. There are some times when you can yell into the void, tell everyone about your thing and nobody cares. It's like, okay, cool. I now have different problems that I may need to be solving. Might be my marketing, might be my product, it might be a bunch of things. But if I'm having to deal with coding, as well as all of that, it starts making it much more difficult for you to get the answers that you need. As in like, is this a real problem that I'm solving? Can I get customers if that's what my business model is? Can I get someone to pay for it? Which, depending on what your business model is, but someone should pay for it. Will people care? Do people understand this thing? Sometimes there's a mismatch between what you've built and what people understand of what you built as well. So not all things are product problems. But actually, most things aren't product problems. It's fast to get into the hands of people. So, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But like I said, like we could build multiple apps today and literally put them into your hands. Whereas You'd have to compile stuff, do all kinds of technical things that I don't understand. It's easy to ride a wave. So by that, I mean, typically, depending on what circles or scenes that you're in, you will see that there are things that are popular, which means that it's beneficial to build things quickly so you can ride that wave. If it takes you 6 months to build something in the Web3 space, by that time, things may have changed. If it takes you 6 months to build something in a policy space where policy is always changing, it's difficult. Whereas if you're like, okay, cool, someone said something, Nicola Sturgeon said something today, cool, let me just build something. So these are the benefits of using NoCode. There are a few challenges, as always, because nothing is perfect. You still have to learn the software. So even if you do notice the wave, like if you don't know the software already, like you still need to learn it. So it's useful to learn how products are built. And it's typically better to start with some of the simpler tools and then work your way up. So though I studied computer science, I didn't understand anything for 3 years. Sorry, Mum. But it was only when I started building products that I was like, oh, a database is like a Google Sheet. And I've been using Google Sheets for 100,000 years. I get it. And then you can just, and like, oh, most things are just lists of things. And as soon as you start realizing that everything is just a list of things, so Twitter is just a list of tweets. Instagram is just a list of posts. Even if it goes that way, it's still a list. So like your reels. So but as soon as you start noticing lists of things everywhere, you're like, oh, okay, like that's how I would structure this in this database. And then you start seeing how things kind of start working. But until you start actually building, you don't have any idea how things work. It's easy to get lost in the noise. So if there are particular social challenges happening, there's lots of stuff that is being said and done. And it's very easy to get, like when I said it's easy to ride the wave, but it's easy to get lost in the noise too. Like you can put something out and like no one cares because there are real troubles going on. Hard to reach people may not have access to computers, phone, or the internet. And if your product is on a computer, phone, or the internet, then it makes it difficult for you to get your thing in front of them to help in the first place. So that's just something that you may need to think about. So for example, one of the projects that I was working on, we would come up here regularly to help, we're building an app to help ethnic minority kids, particularly black kids, manage their mental health in Edinburgh. Oftentimes we'd come up and not all the kids would have a phone. And I was like, oh, like for the first few times, I was like, oh, like maybe they just don't have a phone. And then it was only that I realized that, oh, they got their phones confiscated for them by their families, so they weren't able to use them. But like understanding these things about how people use technology is critical if you want to help people. Especially in the social space, people have typically overpromised and underdelivered. So like they may not want to be overpromised and underdelivered again, so they may not care about your thing. So that's another thing that you need to think about. Typically, when you are building anything, it's much easier to explain a 1-sentence thing than it is to explain a 50-sentence thing. So if you're building a product, your product should be as simple as possible so that you can explain it as simply as possible. Because these people, if you're trying to solve a social challenge, these people don't care about your thing. Even if it will help them, they're likely thinking about so many other things. So you don't want to tell them, like much like Dominic was saying, about all of these features that you can do. Oh, it's got this chat thing, and it can do this, and it'll let you do this, and you can like DM, and like, it's like, no, like I'm trying to feed my kids. So it's like, okay, what's the one thing that this thing does? So the way that I typically explain products, whether they're social or otherwise, is if you are at a party, which is much like this, and people are drunk, no one's drunk yet, and you explained your product to them, they should be able to explain it back to someone the next morning. If they can't do that, then your product is too complicated. So like, and People typically think about, when they compare their products to other things on the market, they typically think about products that have been on the market for much longer than they have. Oh, like TikTok does this, 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 and this. It's like, yeah, but TikTok's like 5 years old. Like, and it went through so many changes and like bought companies and stuff. Like, when it first started, it was, you could like sing along to songs. So like, what is the one simple thing that your end user, customer cares about that you could provide them that will help them achieve their goals, and you can explain to them really simply? Need to pay attention to the known unknowns. So like, there are things that you know that you don't know. So like, everyone knows what GDPR is, but nobody knows what GDPR is. Right? And like, sometimes you need to care about it, and sometimes you don't. But they are known unknowns. Language barriers. Like, you might not know Farsi, but you might know that you need to know Farsi if you're building an app for Iranian people. And then there will be unknown unknowns. So that's a coined phrase from NASA. It's like, there are things that you don't know. And those are the things that will screw with your life every time. So it's really important for you to build and ship things quickly so that you can figure out what these unknowns are. Because they are the things that will change your worldview because of either bias that you have or just not knowing. Like we don't know, we assume that there are aliens, but we don't know if there are aliens, and we don't know what like their cultures are. Like, it might have a huge effect on like this app I'm building with no code. Yes. Does anyone have any questions about any of the things that I rapidly went through? No? Doing an excellent job. Yeah. Yeah, Mum, look at me now. Let's look at some of my projects. So, app called Safer Times that I built. So, it was an app to help people in the early days of the pandemic figure out when they could go to stores. So, in like end of March, like April time, when the pandemic hit, and there was you could even, like, depending on who you were, if you're an elderly person, you could go to a store at like 7 a.m. or if you were like a fireman, you could go on like a Thursday at 2:45 to this particular store. Like, it was chaos. People didn't really understand. And then someone sent around a little Excel picture of all the times, and I was like, this looks like it would be helpful, but it's actually very confusing. So let me build an app to help simplify that, and it might help. And I was bored because we were all bored for so long. So I used a platform called Glide. The website is glideapps.com, GLIDEAPPS.com. Google Sheets, which is where the premise of Glide is that you can build an app in 5 minutes from a Google Sheet. So you basically put information into a Google Sheet, and then it just basically spits out an app. And I was like, that was my gateway drug to the world of no code. And then Figma. I will explain more about why I used Figma, but that wasn't that important. So this is Safer Times. It was basically a list of all the different shops and when you could go to the stores. If you QR code this, if you can see it, will that work? Is that too? In fact, this might be better. Hold on 1 second.
I managed to get it back in.
Okay.
As far away as anyone in the room.
Excellent. Cool. So one of the best things about Glide is that it automatically generates a QR code, which then means that your phone logs into the app, and it's called a PWA, which is a progressive web app, which means it's kind of like a hybrid between like a native app and a mobile app, which then means it was really easy to share. So this is the most successful app that I've ever built. because it was in a time of crisis. I was riding the wave. People didn't understand things. People were searching for things. Like, it was the perfect mix of all of the things. I made it quickly, iterated on it. It was helpful, and then it died a very quick death because, yeah, it was the pandemic. But yeah, this is basically the store, the app. Picture, told you what times you could go to the places. And then when I started getting really fancy, I had like a little Google map thing, which like searched for your nearest store. But yeah, it was like used by 4,000 people. Like, and I was really good. Boop. Let's see what this is. And yeah, the backend is just a Google sheet, effectively. Like, store name, is it in the NHS or? And this is when because when you start building databases, if you know how to use Google Sheets, you already know how to build a database in some slight respects. Yeah, added emoji because I wanted to make it look nice, and then but ultimately it's just a simple product. And it matches all of the things. Search intent is huge. People need to be ideally looking for your thing. Otherwise, you have to convince them that your thing is a thing, and then that's time and effort that you may not have. What did I learn? It's important to move quickly if you think you can help. It's easy to be successful and helpful if there is already search intent. So this isn't just for social things. This is also for your real products. Not that social things aren't real products, but if people are looking for, if people are looking for a way to solve their problem, then that means that there's like intent from your end user or your customer. So for example, people are always looking for ways to lose weight. People are looking for ways to get to stores in a pandemic. People are looking for like how to make bread. Like, what are things that people are looking for, and then provide those solutions. It might not be the exact thing that you want to make, but getting users and end users will allow you to figure out how to serve them in the best way. If your end users or your customers aren't looking for your thing, then you have to go to them, explain to them what your thing is, convince them of the benefit of your thing, and then convince them that your thing is the best thing. The chances are, if you've convinced them that this thing is a problem in the first place, is a problem that they didn't even know that they had, then they're going to be like, okay, cool, let me go and see what else is out there. So then you have to spend even more time and money and effort trying to explain to them that your thing is the thing to help them. Try to focus on things that matter. Yeah, and that's not just in social stuff, but like, yeah, what matters to people, what matters to your end users. Focusing on those things allows you to build meaningful things, and meaningful things are nice. WellKit. So an app to help ethnic minority young people in Edinburgh manage their mental health and curate content to help others. So that's a client project that I was working on. The key challenge that the organization had was that being black in Edinburgh is difficult for a number of reasons, mostly because of the cold. But there are obviously a number of other reasons. So they wanted to build an app to help them of some sort. We did a co-creation project, which is how I would actually think about building all of our products. When you build something, it's really like a mix between what you want and what the market wants. So we went up there, spoke to them, tried to understand how they thought about the world, how they went about their daily lives, noticed things about them, and then I was like, okay, let me build 3 little micro products that might help them. So what we noticed is that they liked learning. Despite what people think about kids, they do like learning. It just needs to be in a way that they like to learn. They like drawing, and they liked telling stories. So I built 3 little apps in Bubble really quickly, like one feature, like no login. Like, no one cares about login. Like no login, like none of this stuff. Put it in front of them, got them to tell us what was terrible, got them to tell us what was great, or what they kind of liked, and then use that information to start to build something that was a bit more meaningful for them. Yeah, used Bubble, which is a tool that I've tried to learn multiple times before, and then in the pandemic, when I had way more time, I finally stuck to it, and it's my favorite app building tool at the moment. Yeah. And yes, can show you it later, but it doesn't look like this anymore. But it's an app that basically lets people like search for their emotions, and then basically if they want to figure out like how to name their emotions, it helps them name it, because most people actually struggle to name their emotions, especially if you're like a 12-year-old boy. And then they might not know what these emotions are. So it gives them an explanation of what the emotions are. And then they get points for all of their activities, because what we noticed is that they like gamification for things. And then it serves them up content based on the feelings that they've had. But what we noticed as well is that I didn't want to just like be in charge of all the content, because they weren't paying me enough. But more importantly, like, I'm not a 12-year-old boy in Edinburgh. I'm not a young lady who's got all of this family stuff going on. So the end product ended up being a platform where they would help curate the content based on different moods and emotions that might help others. So there's a sense of ownership involved, as well as being able to manage their own mental health and do stuff. But yeah, that was a co-creation project, going back and forth, showing them stuff. It's very stressful, but fun. It's important to involve your end users at every step of the way. Even just merely explaining your idea to someone, if they're like, I don't understand what you're talking about, that's an MVP. That's a minimum viable product of your idea. Because maybe you're just explaining it badly. Maybe no one wants it. It's better to find out talking to someone than building it. Kids are very harsh critics, but fun to work with. That's what I learned. And you have to simplify your language and manage expectations. I think that's a useful thing for everyone. Simplifying your language forces you to actually think about what your app is. If you ask people to explain their app in a page, they could do it. If you ask them to explain it in 30 words, could they do it? If you ask them to explain it in like 6, like most people would struggle, because most people's ideas, and that's including myself, like you don't really know what it is yet. They're like, oh yeah, it does all this stuff and it helps these people. So no, pick a specific customer type. We are helping 11 to 14-year-old black kids in Edinburgh, not even in all of Scotland. Right? Be as specific as you can, and try and be as specific as you can with the problem and the solution. Because it's easier for you to figure out whether you're wrong with specificity. I can't believe I said it right first time around. Yeah. Evermind. Evermind is a platform that allows remote workers to get mental health support in their mother tongue. So the story is one of our colleagues went to Southeast Asia when he was at university and found it difficult, so got a therapist there. And then when he came back to the UK, he was like, I still want to keep my therapist, paid her more than her rates there. But it was much cheaper than it was in London, because therapy in London is very expensive. And we were like, oh yeah, cool, this could be a really good app. So the whole team kind of like went around with this idea and we're like, okay, cool, let's try and build it. My first thought was back in the day was like build it in Bubble, but like I didn't know how to use Bubble. Then it was like, okay, let's go and ask the developers how much it would cost. They were like, oh yeah, it's gonna cost like 80 grand. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Let's go and find a white label solution. And we found some white label solutions, I spoke to people, but it's like, it's not what we wanted. So we were like, okay, let's build this a version of this ourselves. And so what we ended up using was a platform called Softer, which Dominic spoke about. We were using a platform called X.AI to do the scheduling. So for people to be able to like book therapists, so like it was like a bookings platform, and that we embedded into the platform. Stripe for payments, Vimeo for videos of the therapist. Airtable was where all the data was held. MailerLite was how we emailed people. The reason I say that we were using X.AI, and are not using X.AI anymore is because very quickly, about 6 months in, they were like, we're shutting down. We're like, oh, okay. So we had to like quickly go around and try and find another makeshift solution. And that's one of the negatives of using no code, but it's also one of the positives because like we didn't spend 80 grand on this. Because one of the key things, I'll show you the platform. So this is one of the key bits of the platform. It allows you to search by language for the therapists and by time zone. And you've got like a profile and you can book, and we can go into the platform in a bit. But yeah, one of the interesting things was like the technical build isn't the hardest part. So what turned out was we thought that the reason why we were going to be successful was because therapy was expensive. Therapy is expensive, I know. The truth is that the financial part of it is not the reason why people don't get therapy. There's a whole stigma piece, right? Obviously. So we were like, oh, I'm glad we didn't spend so much money on the thing where we didn't know what the real problem was. So building with no code allows you, and the smallest version allows you to figure out what the problems actually are and then iterate your way to something meaningful. So now I could build this in Bubble, or if we can get developers to build it, but like I know what I'm building, I know what problem we're solving. There's like a whole stigma piece. It's like it allows you to figure out who the customer is. We thought that we were going to go B2C because like everyone needs therapy. So like, especially in London, it's like cool. Like if you had therapy really cheaply, you'd be able to like get like all the help that you need. B2C isn't the way for us right now. It's a B2B play. It's just like, okay, like, and the remote workers bit came on later. All the language of what we were talking about changed. Our marketing has started to change. Like the products started to change, but the product wasn't the hardest part. Simplify language. Sorry, were you going to ask a question? Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Sorry. Simplifying language is always crucial. Again, I keep mentioning it, maybe because I used to be a copywriter, but nobody reads stuff. So that's why I stopped being a copywriter. Simplifying your language forces you to understand what it is that you're doing. People hide behind multiple words because it makes them sound cool. One of the best tips that I ever got from my head of copy was like, write like you're writing for a 6-year-old. Yeah, it's a really good tip. Dominic and I were talking about this again, but you need to market more than you build. So most people just build, and they build things, and I do the same thing, and terrible. So this is a slide just for me too, but it's like, you build things because you like, if I build it, they will come. They will not come. There's TikTok exists, Netflix exists. Like, if they never heard of your thing again, they would live happily. So you have to actually go to them and tell them about your thing and say why your thing would help them. And the chances are most of the people that you tell won't care. Like 5% email rates are good. So like if you want to speak to 5 people, if you want to get 5 people, you need to speak to 100 people. If you want to get 5,000, I'm not very good at maths, but like there's maths involved. Yeah. Cool. Lastly, I'm building a product. I'm not really sure what it is yet, but it's a product to help people with ADHD schedule Twitter posts. So I struggle with scheduling Twitter posts because I have ADHD, and I'm disorganized, chaotic at best. So I wanted to build a product to help people like me. I'm using Bubble, a platform called Pathfix, which allows you to get logins for things, the Twitter API, and after this talks that we were having, maybe open AI and to do things because I like experimenting. Yeah, but very quickly, it's like, what interesting thing would you say to your potential customers about Web3? So all of those things change randomly to effectively help you prompt the conversation so that you can write stuff, and then it will just schedule it in the background so you don't have to think about time and all that stuff. Why am I learning? It's easy to get bogged down in the details, like I was getting annoyed with things. Building a product for people with ADHD is difficult when you have ADHD. That's a big learning. And I need to take my own advice around customer research, which is like actually going to talk to people and stuff, but like I've been busy. But there's always an excuse. You should always talk to your customers. Any questions? Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. This is a question over here. Sorry, do you mind using?
Yeah, so hi Dan. You were saying you and your brother have a customer research business on the go as well, and like we've struggled with this before, but from your MVP, your initial ideation of an app, all the way through to, let's say, I don't know, your exit, or the point where you feel comfortable that it's solid enough for customers to actually engage with it on a wider level, like you're saying. What's the timeline like between that for market research and things like that? What sort of timeline do you schedule from MVP right through to a finished, fully realized ideation of what you want to build? I know that's quite grandiose, but you know, yeah.
It's a very good question, and a question that I hear a lot, which is why I have a very good canned answer for this, which is you should always be talking to your customers. So the reason why you should always be talking to your customers is because the market is always changing, and like attitudes are always changing. So like even if you build something perfect today, tomorrow is a new day. They've been using your app for a day now. They might be bored. So if you've done a whole bunch of customer research and then they used it and you stop talking to them, the market is changing, the world is changing, that technology is changing, new apps come on the market, like pricing might change. Like if you don't always talk to your customers and keeping a good relationship with them and understanding what their wants are, what their problems are, how they're articulating their problems, how they're currently trying to solve their problems, if the thing that you're building is suitable enough for them, do they care, will they pay, are they the customer, the user, like if you don't know this stuff, which is continuously changing every single second of the day, then you will miss out. So the great example that I use is Blockbuster, right? So Blockbuster is a great case for people that didn't care about listening to their customers, mostly because their interest didn't align with the customer's interests. So what people don't realize is that Blockbuster's business model, Blockbuster is for all the young people here, Blockbuster is a old company that used to allow people to rent videos from them. Their business model, which they didn't tell people about, was the fact that most of their revenue was generated by late fees. So they cared, they didn't care. The longer you kept it, the video, and didn't return it, the more money they made. So when there was talk of like the internet, or like people like doing like, there was Love Film, right? Love Film was Netflix before it was Netflix. They were like, oh, cool, there's no late fees. And like Blockbuster were like, oh, we don't care about that. Like, there's only one Blockbuster in the world now, and that's only in the place that has bad internet. So like, if you don't always pay attention to your customers' needs and goals and align your interests with theirs, you will be bad. I think bad things will happen. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Did you have a question? Time for a couple.
I've done a remarkable job then. Look at this.
Can you talk, I know me and you talk about it, can you talk more...
Sorry, Dominic, can I give you the Zoom crowd?
Yeah. Can you talk more about, so you produce a lot of products. Can you talk more about this kind of like producing a lot of products, why you do it, kind of like your intentions from it, like that context?
Yeah, cool. So I make a lot of apps for myself. Some things never see the light of day. Some things I put out into the market. The reason why I build apps is to learn. So like learn how things work. Because like we were talking about before, it's like, I'm not a software developer. So like, I don't know like things that software developers are supposed to know. Testing out the market, testing out like what to build and figuring out things. But one of the key reasons why I build things is to improve something called my shipping muscle, which is consistently putting yourself out into the world and putting products out into the world means that you lower your like fear. Like there's a fear that people have with like putting stuff out. They don't want to, like I remember my first presentation. It was awful. I mean, not that this is any better, but like it was awful. But the more you do it, the easier it gets for you to do things, and it gets you into spaces and rooms. People see the things that you're doing. Like, people know about my products. Like, you were talking about, you went on my Twitter. Like, I forgot that I tweet. So the more you ship, the more you put yourself out there, the more you market yourself, the more you market your products, you build a reputation for yourself, you learn things. The chances are, like I said, most of the things that you make will not be a thing. And that's fine. Because every time you build something else, the DNA of that last thing goes into the next thing. So there's a famous maker called Peter Levels, who built a platform called Remote OK, which is a platform to help remote people, remote workers get jobs and go and fly around the world and do remote things. He wrote a list of all of his products, and he did like 30 before like his main one took off. So there were benefits to launching that aren't just about like the technicality of the build. So there's all that stuff that I'm trying to learn as well, like how to articulate things. Like how, like you notice when you're on Twitter, it's the dumb tweets that you don't care about that do well, or the ones that are a single sentence. Like I've written well-crafted threads, like I'm like slaved over them, like with my quill and like candlelight, and did nothing. Then one tweet that I did like it was like 11 o'clock at night, and on like a Friday night or something like that, I was just like, yeah, just did numbers. Like you don't know what you don't know. So like putting more stuff out into the market allows you to, there's a concept called improving your surface area of luck. Your surface area of luck is basically about doing stuff and telling people about things. Like if you just tell people about things and don't do anything, no one likes you. If you just do stuff in secret and don't tell anyone about it, and then when you eventually you do come out and tell people, hey, I did a thing, like no one cares. But if you do both simultaneously, like the chances are that people will see what you've done and you'll build something meaningful. So that's hopefully what I'm doing. There's no method to the madness, which is why I'm building an app to help. But yeah, thank you for the question.
I think we've got time for one more possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. You build apps for social impact.
Mm-hmm.
My question is how you measure the impact of your apps or something to the people that use the app itself.
Yep. Very good question. I did actually a whole workshop on measuring value, which is difficult to go into right now, but ultimately it's a combination of like goals. Like it's difficult to measure impact and value on something if you don't have a goal. Like, so people typically don't put goals on things. So you need to have smart, measurable goals for you to figure out like whether you reach them or not. So for example, with some of the projects that we've done, it's like, okay, like have we reached 30 young people? Like, have we done X? Like, have we got 30 therapy sessions booked? Like, there's the mechanics of the measuring of the value there. And then there's also different types of value that you could measure. So for example, psychological value. Like, does my product help people feel safe? There's social value. Does my product bring people together? There is financial value. Does allow people to save money or like spend more effectively or make money? Like there are lots of different kinds of like human values that people have intrinsically. Your product doesn't need to have all of them, but you need to recognize what value that you're trying to bring firstly, and then figure out how to measure it, and then iterate until you get to the point where you are actually achieving those goals, or yeah. Cool.
I sense questions bubbling up, but we better call it a night there. Sorry, just because
no worries.
we like to have a firm deadline for these things. But can we have one more round of applause for both Dan and Dominic? For,
Thank you.